The great empire of Seriphus was burning. Across the dark sky, fire and light tore through the stars as enemy ships rained destruction on the royal city below. The once proud towers of the alien queen's palace glowed in crimson flame, their glass domes shattering one by one. Inside the grand hall, Queen Lyra stood tall, her emerald armor shining under the flicker of explosions. Her heart raced, but her face stayed calm. She had ruled for years with wisdom and strength, and she believed her guards would protect her until the end. But then, everything changed. When the first wave of enemy ships broke through the defense line, panic filled the palace. Her most loyal soldiers, the royal guard she had trusted since her coronation, looked to each other in fear. The ground shook. The sound of another explosion echoed through the golden corridors. And then, without warning, they dropped their weapons and ran. One by one, they fled the hall, shouting that the battle was lost. Lyra called out to them, her voice echoing, "Stand your ground!" That's an order, but no one turned back. She stood alone as the roof above began to crumble. Lyra's mind spun with disbelief. Betrayal. It was the one thing she had never expected from her own people. Her guards, her protectors, the ones sworn by oath to die for her, they had abandoned her in her final hour. She looked up as fire spread across the tall pillars, the golden lights flickering out one by one. In that same moment, not far from the palace, a human soldier named Captain Ryan was fighting to reach the Queen's chamber. He had come to Seriphus weeks ago as part of a peace mission between the Human Alliance and the Alien Empire. He was supposed to be only an observer, not a warrior, but when he saw the betrayal unfold through the chaos, something inside him refused to leave. The humans in Seriphus had been enemies for years, but Ryan could not watch an innocent life die, not even that of an alien queen. The palace gates were broken, the halls filled with smoke. Ryan pushed through, his armor scorched, his lungs burning from the heat. He called out through the static of his communicator, but there was no response. Everyone else had escaped or been killed. The once beautiful hall was now a ruin, filled with fallen banners and shattered glass. At the center, through the smoke and falling debris, he saw her, the Queen of Seriphus, standing alone, surrounded by fire. Lyra turned as she heard footsteps behind her. She expected another enemy soldier or perhaps one of her traitorous guards, but instead she saw a man in human armor, his face dirty and bruised, yet his eyes sharp and calm. For a moment she froze. A human here? Her mind raced with confusion. "You should not be here," she said sharply, her voice trembling with exhaustion. "This is not your war." Ryan looked around at the flames climbing the walls. "Maybe not," he said simply, "but I'm not leaving you here to die." Before she could reply, another explosion shook the palace. A large beam cracked and fell from the ceiling, nearly crushing her. Ryan lunged forward, grabbing her by the arm and pulling her to safety. They fell together to the floor as dust filled the air. Lyra coughed, her strength fading. She had taken a blast wound to her shoulder earlier, and now blood trickled down her silver armor. Ryan quickly tore a strip from his uniform and wrapped it around her arm to stop the bleeding. She tried to push him away. Why would a human help me?" she whispered weakly. He didn't answer right away. He looked at her, the proud queen who had lost everything in a single night, and said, "Because someone has to." The palace continued to crumble around them. The sound of distant engines grew louder. Enemy soldiers were landing outside. The Queen's location would soon be found. Ryan knew they had only minutes. He lifted her carefully, one arm around her back, and began moving through the burning corridors. Lyra protested weakly. "You don't even know me. Why risk your life?" He gave a faint smile through the smoke. "Maybe I don't need to know you to do the right thing." Outside, the night was filled with chaos. The once beautiful gardens of Seriphus were now blackened ruins. The sky glowed orange as enemy ships circled above. Ryan carried her through the fallen gates, each step heavier than the last. Behind them, the palace's central tower collapsed in a burst of fire and light. Lyra looked back at her home, the heart of her empire, falling apart before her eyes. Everything she had built, every soul she had ruled, was gone. Her chest ached not from pain but from heartbreak, and yet this human, a man she barely knew, was carrying her away from death when even her own people had not. Ryan stumbled once, catching himself before falling. He could feel the heat on his back and hear the enemy shouts closing in. But he didn't stop. His only thought was getting her to safety. He found a side path leading to an underground escape route he had seen earlier during the mission. As they entered the dark tunnel, Lyra's eyes fluttered open again. "You're not like the others," she said softly. Ryan looked down at her, his face covered in soot. "Neither are you." As the tunnel door sealed behind them and the roar of the burning palace faded into the distance, the screen fades to black. The audience is left wondering, why did he choose to save her? And what fate now awaits the human soldier and the alien queen who had both lost their worlds, yet found each other in the ashes of war? The air in the tunnel was cold and heavy with dust. Each of Ryan's footsteps echoed softly against the steel floor. He carried Queen Lyra in his arms, her armor scratched and dull, her crown slightly bent from the blast. The flickering emergency lights painted the walls in red and gold. Behind them, the distant rumble of explosions grew quieter, but Ryan knew it wasn't over. The enemy wouldn't stop until the queen was found. After what felt like hours, they reached the end of the tunnel, a heavy metal door marked with strange alien symbols. Ryan set Lyra down gently and wiped the sweat from his forehead. "This must lead to an old bunker," he said, trying to force it open. The door hissed before sliding aside, revealing a dark chamber filled with dust, broken crates, and dim light still struggling to glow after years of silence. "This will do," Ryan murmured. He guided her inside and sealed the door behind them. Lyra's voice was faint but sharp. "You shouldn't have brought me here." "They'll come." Ryan turned toward her, his tone calm but firm. "If I hadn't, you'd already be dead." The queen's eyes narrowed. Even in her weakness, her pride was clear. She looked around the shelter. Cold metal walls, faint light, and the smell of old air. For the ruler of a great empire, this place felt like a tomb. She sat down slowly against a wall, her hand pressing on the wound at her shoulder. Ryan found a half-working light source and placed it nearby. The glow lit her face, revealing streaks of ash across her cheeks. She looked exhausted, but there was still something fierce in her eyes. He knelt beside her. "Let me see your arm." She hesitated, then sighed. "You're very bold for a human." Ryan smiled slightly. "I've been called worse." Carefully, he removed the makeshift bandage and cleaned the wound with a small medical kit from his armor. Lyra winced but didn't move. When he was done, he tore another strip of fabric from his sleeve and tied it tightly. "You humans are strange," she muttered. Ryan chuckled softly. "Yeah, we get that a lot." For a few quiet minutes, neither of them spoke. The hum of the bunker's old power systems was the only sound. Then Lyra broke the silence. "Why did you stay?" she asked quietly. "All my guards ran. Even my generals left me to die. You had every reason to do the same. Humans and my kind are not allies." Ryan looked at her. His eyes were tired but steady. "I don't know. Maybe I just couldn't watch someone die when I could help." Her lips curved slightly, almost a sad smile. "You risked your life for a stranger." "Yeah," he said simply. "Guess I'm bad at letting people down." Lyra leaned her head back against the wall, her gaze drifting toward the ceiling. "When I was a child," she whispered, "I was told that loyalty is the heart of leadership, that my guards would stand with me until death. But when the time came, they chose life over honor. Perhaps I was a fool to trust them." Ryan sat across from her, his voice quiet. "No, you weren't wrong to trust. They were wrong to betray." She looked at him, her blue eyes reflecting the dim light. "You speak as if you've known betrayal." He looked away, a shadow crossing his face. "Yeah, I have." Lyra wanted to ask more, but the look in his eyes stopped her. Something about him carried pain, a memory he didn't want to share. The silence between them grew heavy again, filled with the weight of unspoken stories. Suddenly, a faint sound echoed from above, a metallic thud. Then another. Ryan froze. He held a finger to his lips and moved silently toward the door. Lyra's heart quickened. "What is it?" she whispered. Ryan pressed his ear to the metal surface. "Footsteps," he said softly. "Someone's out there." He moved quickly, checking his weapon. The low hum of scanners passed above them, enemy drones searching the area. Their red lights blinked faintly through the cracks in the ceiling. Lyra's breath caught. "They're tracking my signal," she realized. "My armor, it's giving them my location." Ryan nodded. "Then we get rid of it," she hesitated. Her armor was more than protection. It was a symbol of her rule. But survival mattered more. With slow, trembling hands, she unclasped the shining plates of her chest armor and dropped them quietly to the floor. The sound of metal on stone echoed softly in the dark. Ryan helped her remove the energy core from the armor and crushed it with his boot. The lights outside flickered once, then faded. The drones lost their signal and moved away. For a long moment there was silence. Only the faint sound of Lyra's breathing filled the air. Ryan sat back down beside her. "They're gone," he said finally. She looked at him again, studying his face. He was exhausted, covered in burns and dirt, yet there was calm in his expression. A strange kind of peace. "You don't act like a soldier," she said. He smiled faintly. "I stopped acting like one a long time ago." Lyra lowered her gaze, her voice soft. "You saved me, human. But what will you do now? You can't stay here forever." Ryan looked toward the dark tunnel that led deeper underground. "Tomorrow we move. There might be an old comm station nearby. If I can fix it, I can send a signal for help or find us a way out." She gave a tired nod. "Very well, Captain Ryan, for now. We rest." He leaned back against the wall, his weapon in his lap, eyes still alert. The Queen closed her eyes, her breathing slow and calm for the first time since the fall began. Outside, the night sky of Seriphus burned with the light of a dying empire. Inside the bunker, two unlikely souls, one human, one alien, sat together in silence, not knowing that their choices tonight would change the fate of both their worlds forever. And above them, hidden in the shadows, a faint red light blinked again. Someone or something was still watching. Fade out. The cold morning light crept through the cracks in the bunker roof. Ryan opened his eyes slowly, muscles aching, ears still tuned to every sound. He hadn't really slept. His hand still rested on his weapon, and the faint hum of the generator filled the silence. Queen Lyra was awake too. She sat near the broken console, quietly staring at the flickering light. Her emerald armor lay beside her, dented, burned, and useless now. She looked smaller without it, fragile even, though the fire in her eyes hadn't dimmed. "Did you rest?" Ryan asked quietly, standing up. "Rest?" she said with a faint smile. "My empire burns above us, Captain. Queens do not rest when their world is gone." Ryan didn't reply. He just checked the power cells on his blaster and loaded his backpack. "We move soon," he said. "The drones might return." Lyra nodded, pulling the cloak he had given her tighter around her shoulders. "You truly think we can escape them?" Ryan looked at her, then at the door. "We have to." They left the bunker through a narrow tunnel that led to the surface. The passage was cold and wet, filled with echoes of distant rumbling. When they finally stepped outside, the sight was haunting. The royal city of Seriphus was gone. What had once been a shining world of towers and silver bridges was now nothing but black smoke and flame. The sky glowed orange from the burning ruins. Lyra stopped for a moment, her throat tightening. "This was my home," she whispered. "Every stone here was built with pride and peace. Now, look at it." Ryan placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then we make sure it's not forgotten." But before she could respond, a sharp sound sliced through the air, the hum of engines. Ryan froze. He looked up. 3 small enemy drones moved across the sky, scanning the ruins with red beams of light. "Down," Ryan whispered, pulling her behind the remains of a wall. The red light swept across the ground, scanning for movement. The drones hovered closer, mechanical voices echoing. "Target signal detected." "Queen Lyra, alive!" Lyra's eyes widened. "They've found us." "Run," Ryan said sharply. They sprinted through the broken streets, dodging fire and rubble. The drones opened fire, their plasma shots exploding against walls and statues. Dust filled the air. Lyra stumbled, her injured arm slowing her down. Ryan grabbed her hand and pulled her forward. "This way," he shouted, pointing toward a narrow alley between 2 fallen towers. They ran through it, the heat of explosions behind them. The chase echoed across the ruins, metallic wings buzzing, energy blasts lighting the shadows. They burst into a wider courtyard, half collapsed and filled with debris. In the center stood a massive alien statue, cracked but still upright, a monument to Lyra's ancestors. She stopped for a moment, gasping for breath, staring at the face of her foremother carved in stone. Ryan saw the drones approaching. "Lyra, we can't stop." But before they could move again, the ground trembled. One of the drones fired a missile that hit the statue's base. The stone giant toppled over, crashing down between them and the attackers. Dust exploded around them, blinding their vision. "Are you hurt?" Ryan called out. "I'm fine," she shouted back, coughing through the smoke. Ryan fired at the drones, hitting one dead center. It exploded in a burst of blue fire. The others circled back, scanning for targets. Ryan's weapon clicked, energy cell empty. He cursed under his breath. Out of charge. Lyra looked around quickly. Her eyes caught sight of an old transport shaft nearby, half buried under debris. "There," she said. "That tunnel leads to the lower docks." Ryan didn't hesitate. He pulled her toward it. The shaft's door was half broken, but he forced it open. They climbed down into the darkness as plasma blasts struck the walls above them. The tunnel was steep, filled with dust and darkness. The only light came from the flickering glow of Ryan's wrist lamp. Their footsteps echoed down the metallic passage as they ran deeper into the underground. Behind them, the drones followed, tiny machines with cold persistence. Their lights pierced the darkness like red stars. Ryan stopped and aimed upward, firing the last few shots from his blaster. One drone fell, sparks flying, but the others kept coming. "Keep moving," he shouted. Lyra looked at him, her voice trembling but steady. "You're going to get yourself killed, human." He gave a tired grin. "Not if I can help it." They reached the end of the tunnel where it opened into an old docking bay, a massive underground hangar filled with broken ships and shattered metal. Dust floated in the air like ash. Lyra looked around, her voice filled with hope. "If we can find a working ship, we can escape this sector." Ryan started checking the wrecks one by one. "Most of these are junk," he said. "But maybe." He stopped, spotting a smaller scout ship buried under debris. The frame was damaged, but its core looked intact. "This one might work." They rushed toward it, clearing off pieces of broken metal. Ryan climbed into the cockpit and tried the controls. The screens flickered weakly, still alive. "It needs power," he muttered. Lyra placed her hand on the console, her eyes glowing faintly. Energy from her body flowed into the system, awakening it. The ship's lights came on, engines humming. Ryan looked at her in awe. "You can do that?" She gave a faint smile. "A queen's bond with her ships is deeper than you think." Before they could celebrate, a loud crash echoed from behind them. The last drone had found the bay. It flew in fast, firing shots at the ship. Ryan ducked and fired back, hitting its side. Sparks flew. Lyra joined in, channeling energy through her palms, sending a burst of light that struck the drone dead on. It fell smoking to the floor. Silence filled the air again. Only their heavy breathing remained. Ryan looked at her, half smiling. "You're full of surprises," Lyra's voice softened. "And you, human, are full of foolish courage." He laughed quietly, then climbed back into the cockpit. "Let's hope that courage is enough to get us out of here." As the engines roared to life, the ship slowly lifted off the ground, rising through the cracked tunnel toward the open sky. Outside, the ruins of Seriphus stretched endlessly below them, a graveyard of fire and memories. And in that rising ship, two unlikely allies looked at each other, knowing this was only the beginning. Somewhere in the darkness above, an enemy flagship changed course, locking onto their signal. The real chase had only begun. Fade out. The small scout ship cut through the dark clouds of Seriphus, its engines groaning from damage. Sparks flickered from the control panels as Captain Ryan struggled to keep it steady. The once grand planet below them was a sea of fire, glowing like a dying sun. Inside the cockpit, Queen Lyra sat quietly beside him, her cloak wrapped tightly around her shoulders. She stared out the cracked window, her face illuminated by the flickering lights of the burning cities below. The world she had ruled, protected, and loved was gone. Ryan adjusted the controls again. "We'll need to land soon," he said, his voice low but calm. "The engines won't hold." Lyra nodded slowly, still watching the horizon. "There's an abandoned colony to the east," she said. "If we can reach it, we might find shelter." "Let's hope it's still standing," Ryan muttered. The ship trembled violently as another system failed. Warning alarms echoed through the cabin. Ryan fought the controls, guiding the ship toward a valley of black rock and shadow. The landing was rough. The ship scraped the ground, bounced once, and crashed hard into the dust. Silence followed. Only the faint hiss of steam broke the air. Ryan groaned, unbuckling his seatbelt. "Well, that could have been smoother." Lyra gave him a small, tired smile. "You humans have an odd way of defining survival." He chuckled softly, checking the systems. "At least we're alive." They stepped out into the cold night. The air was thin and dry, carrying the faint scent of smoke and metal. Around them stretched a barren valley under a pale blue moon. In the distance, they saw the faint outlines of old metal structures, ruins of an outpost that had long been forgotten. "This will do for now," Ryan said. The ship's engines roared to life. Ryan tried to chase, but a blast threw him back, knocking him to the ground. Through the smoke, he saw the ship rise into the sky with Lyra aboard, her eyes wide with fear as she reached out toward him. Then the ship vanished into the clouds. Ryan lay on the ground, bruised and bleeding, staring up at the sky. His heart pounded with rage. "I'll bring her back," he whispered. "I swear it." As night fell over the ruins of Seriphus, a single human soldier stood alone once more, ready to face an empire to save the one he had promised to protect. Fade out. The night on Seriphus was dark and bitterly cold. The sky above burned faintly with the light of distant fires. Ryan stood at the edge of the cliff, staring toward the northern horizon where the enemy ship had vanished. His body ached, his armor cracked, and blood ran down his arm, but his eyes were alive with fury. He had failed to protect her. The image of Lyra's terrified face haunted him, the way she reached out as Arik's men dragged her away. Every breath he took since then burned like fire. Ryan clenched his fists. "You're not taking her," he whispered. "Not while I'm still breathing." He limped back toward the crashed scout ship. Most systems were dead, but after hours of work under the cold wind, he managed to power up the sensors. The screen flickered weakly, showing a faint energy trail from Arik's vessel. Ryan traced it north, deep into the Black Range, a place once used for military outposts, now overrun by mercenaries and scavengers. "That's where they took her," he muttered. "Then that's where I go." He gathered his weapons, his pulse rifle, a combat knife, and the last 2 grenades he had. He knew he wouldn't survive if things went wrong, but that didn't matter anymore. Before leaving, he looked up at the stars one last time. "Hold on, Lyra," he said softly. "I'm coming." The journey through the wasteland took hours. The ground was rough, filled with old wreckage and twisted metal. Every few minutes he stopped to listen, making sure he wasn't being followed. The silence was heavy, almost alive. Finally, as dawn began to paint the horizon, he saw it. A massive fortress built into the cliffs, surrounded by turrets and guard towers. Alien patrols moved around the base, their armor glowing faintly in the dark. Ryan crouched behind a ridge, studying the defenses. He had faced worse odds before, but never alone. He took a deep breath and began his descent. Moving like a shadow, he crept past the first patrol, hiding behind a half-buried transport. When one guard turned, Ryan struck fast, silently pulling him down and taking his weapon. He continued deeper into the base, avoiding the lights, moving through smoke and ruin. Every step brought him closer to the heart of the fortress and to her. Inside, Lyra sat in a cell made of shimmering blue energy. Her wrists were bound in metal cuffs that glowed faintly with suppression fields. She had been stripped of her royal armor, left in torn robes that once represented power. Arik entered the chamber, tall and cold. "My queen," he said mockingly.
"How far you have fallen." Lyra glared at him.
"You were like a brother to me once, Arik. Why are you doing this?" He smiled darkly. "Because the Empire needs strength. You were too weak to rule. You trusted humans, begged for peace. I will rebuild what you destroyed." "By becoming the monster you once swore to fight?" she said bitterly. Arik stepped closer. "History will remember me as the savior, and you as the last mistake." Before she could answer, a loud explosion shook the ground. The lights flickered. Arik turned sharply. "What was that?" A soldier ran in. "Sir, the outer wall's been breached. One attacker, moving fast." Arik's expression hardened. "A single attacker?" He paused, then smiled. "The human." Lyra's heart raced. "Ryan!" She whispered. Ryan was already inside. Smoke filled the corridors as he moved with deadly focus, firing and advancing, his armor scorched but his aim steady. Guards fell one by one, confusion spreading through the ranks. He reached the command corridor, ducked behind cover, and tossed a grenade. The blast tore through the wall, sending metal and sparks flying. From behind the smoke, Arik stepped out with a group of elite guards. "Impressive," he said. "You survived longer than I thought." Ryan didn't answer. He fired, taking down 2 guards before rolling behind a pillar. Energy bolts sizzled through the air. Arik shouted, "You can't win, human. You're outnumbered." Ryan reloaded calmly. "Maybe," he said, "but I'm not here to win." He moved again, fast and fierce. His shots were precise, his movements driven by something stronger than fear, by purpose. One by one, the guards fell. Finally, it was just him and Arik. The alien commander drew a plasma blade, its blue light cutting through the smoke. "You think you can protect her forever?" Arik said. "She's not yours to save." Ryan's voice was cold. "She's not yours to destroy." They clashed. The fight was brutal, blade against rifle, strength against determination. Arik was faster, stronger, but Ryan was relentless. He blocked, dodged, and struck back with everything he had. At one point, Arik's blade sliced across Ryan's side. He stumbled, blood soaking his armor, but he didn't stop. With a final push, he slammed his shoulder into Arik, driving him back into the control panel. Sparks burst out. Arik growled, swinging wildly. But Ryan ducked under the strike and plunged his knife into the alien's side. Arik gasped, collapsing to his knees. "You can't win." Ryan stepped closer. "I already did." He hit the release switch and Lyra's cell flickered off. She fell forward, weak but alive. Ryan rushed to her, catching her before she hit the ground. "Hey," he whispered, breathing hard. "Told you I'd come." Lyra looked up at him, eyes full of tears. "You shouldn't have risked this," he smiled faintly. "Wasn't really a choice." Behind them, Arik tried to rise, his eyes burning with rage. But Ryan turned, aimed his weapon, and fired. The shot hit true. Arik fell for the last time. The alarms blared. More soldiers were coming. Ryan helped Lyra to her feet. "We've got to move." Together, they ran through the corridors as the base began to collapse. Flames erupted from the walls. Outside, Ryan spotted a small escape ship. He lifted her inside, started the engine, and the craft roared to life. As they rose into the night sky, the fortress below exploded in a wave of fire and dust. Lyra looked out the window, her eyes reflecting the burning ruins. "It's over," she said softly. Ryan shook his head. "Not yet. They'll come after us again," she turned to him. "Then we'll face them together." For a long moment, they just looked at each other, the human soldier and the alien queen, two survivors bound by fate. And as the ship vanished into the clouds, a single line echoed through the dark. "Sometimes, the strongest alliances are born not from power, but from sacrifice." Fade out. The small ship drifted silently through space. Outside the window stretched the endless stars, cold, distant, and endless. Inside, Queen Lyra sat quietly beside the faint blue light of the control panel. Her reflection stared back at her. A queen without a crown, a ruler without a world. Ryan was at the pilot's seat, checking the ship's systems. His side was bandaged, his uniform torn, but he was alive. He glanced at her every few seconds, making sure she was all right. "You should rest," he said softly. "You've been awake since the escape." Lyra shook her head. "I can't sleep." "Not yet." Ryan nodded, understanding. "Still thinking about Arik?" She turned to face him. "Not just him. Everything. My people, my empire. What's left of it?" She sighed, her voice trembling. "Do you know what it means when an alien queen loses her crown, Captain?" He looked at her gently. "Maybe it means she gets to decide who she really is." Lyra smiled faintly, though her eyes were full of pain. "You speak as if identity is a choice. For me it was destiny, duty. I was born to rule, to protect. But now I've lost both." Ryan leaned back. "Maybe you didn't lose them. Maybe they changed shape." She tilted her head. "Changed shape?" The small ship drifted silently through space. Outside the window stretched the endless stars, cold, distant, and endless. Inside, Queen Lyra sat quietly beside the faint blue light of the control panel. Her reflection stared back at her. A queen without a crown, a ruler without a world. Ryan was at the pilot's seat, checking the ship's systems. His side was bandaged, his uniform torn, but he was alive. He glanced at her every few seconds, making sure she was all right. "You should rest," he said softly. "You've been awake since the escape." Lyra shook her head. "I can't sleep." "Not yet." Ryan nodded, understanding. "Still thinking about Arik?" She turned to face him. "Not just him. Everything. My people, my empire. What's left of it?" She sighed, her voice trembling. "Do you know what it means when an alien queen loses her crown, Captain?" He looked at her gently. "Maybe it means she gets to decide who she really is." Lyra smiled faintly, though her eyes were full of pain. "You speak as if identity is a choice. For me it was destiny, duty. I was born to rule, to protect. But now I've lost both." Ryan leaned back. "Maybe you didn't lose them. Maybe they changed shape." She tilted her head. "Changed shape?" "You don't have to protect me anymore, Ryan. You've done enough." He turned toward her, his eyes steady. "I made you a promise. I don't break those. Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't reply. Something in his voice, simple, honest, human, stirred something deep within her. Later, as the ship floated through the quiet dark, Lyra stood by the viewing window. The stars shimmered around her like 1,000 tiny ghosts. Ryan joined her, his steps soft against the metal floor. They made their way to one of the old shelters, pushing open a rusted door. Inside was darkness, dust, and silence. Ryan found a small generator and managed to power up a single light. It flickered weakly, revealing a few metal crates and an old table. Lyra sat down, clearly exhausted. Her wound had reopened slightly and blood stained her sleeve. Ryan noticed immediately. "You're bleeding again," he said, kneeling beside her. "It's nothing," she replied quickly, though her voice wavered. He shook his head. "You said that last time too." Without waiting for permission, he carefully removed the cloth and checked the wound. Lyra flinched slightly but didn't stop him. He cleaned it again, working in silence. The moment felt strangely calm. The chaos outside seemed far away. After a while, she said softly, "You risk your life too easily, Captain Ryan." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "And you don't risk yours enough. Maybe that's why we balance each other out." Lyra tilted her head slightly, studying him. "You speak as if you've forgotten fear." Ryan's gaze dropped for a moment. "Fear's still there," he said quietly. "I just stopped letting it decide what kind of man I want to be." For the first time since they met, Lyra truly smiled. It wasn't a royal smile or one of command. It was soft, almost human. "Your people. They are different from us," she said. "You fight not only with weapons, but with heart." Ryan leaned back against the wall. "And your people fight with pride. Both have their flaws." The silence that followed was gentle, not heavy like before. Outside, the wind howled softly through the cracks in the metal. Inside, the faint hum of the generator filled the space between them. Lyra looked at him again. "Back in the palace. When the roof fell, I thought it was the end. And then I saw you, a human. The last face I expected to see." Ryan smiled faintly. "Yeah, I get that a lot." She laughed quietly. A small sound, but warm. "You're a strange man, Captain." "I've been told worse," he said. For a moment, their eyes met. Neither spoke. The air between them felt charged, something unspoken passing in silence. But before the moment could deepen, the generator flickered. The light dimmed. Ryan stood up instantly. "We've got to keep that running if we don't want to freeze." He walked to the generator, adjusting the wires. As he worked, Lyra's eyes followed him. She saw the cuts on his hands, the burns on his neck, the tired way he moved, but still with purpose, still with strength. "You could have left me," she said softly. He didn't look up. "I could have," he admitted. "But then I'd have to live knowing I didn't do the right thing." Lyra lowered her gaze. "In all my life, no one ever stayed when everything fell apart. You did." Ryan glanced back at her. "Maybe someone had to show you that not everyone runs." Outside, thunder rolled through the sky, distant explosions from faraway battles. Lyra shivered slightly. Ryan took off his jacket and handed it to her. She hesitated, then accepted it silently. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, sitting across from her. "Get some rest. We move again at first light." As the generator hummed softly, Lyra leaned back against the wall, watching the human who had risked everything for her. There was still so much she didn't understand. Why he stayed, why he cared. But for the first time since her empire fell, she didn't feel completely alone. Ryan watched the shadows dance on the walls. His mind was heavy with questions about what came next, about the signal he had sent earlier that still hadn't received a reply. He didn't know if rescue would ever come, but as he looked at the Queen resting in the soft light, he made himself a silent promise he would protect her, no matter what came next. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant. The war was far from over. But in that quiet corner of a dead world, hope began to flicker again, small and fragile, like the light of the generator keeping them alive. And far above, unseen by either of them, a massive warship drifted through the clouds, locking onto the faint signal of the crashed scout ship. The hunt for the alien queen had just begun. Fade out. The morning sky of Seriphus was gray and still. Smoke hung low over the valley where Ryan and Queen Lyra had taken shelter. The air was cold, and the silence carried the weight of everything that had been lost. Ryan stood outside the ruined outpost, scanning the horizon through his binoculars. He could see distant flashes of light from ongoing battles far beyond the mountains. The war hadn't ended, it had only moved away. Inside, Lyra sat near the generator, her cloak wrapped around her. She watched the flickering light and thought of her people. Every moment of peace felt heavy with guilt. She was alive, but her empire was ashes. Ryan returned a few minutes later, brushing dust from his armor. "No movement nearby," he said. "Looks clear for now." Lyra nodded faintly. "For now," she repeated, her voice low. But peace never lasts long. He sat across from her, adjusting his weapon. "You're right," he said. "That's why we move soon. We can't stay in one place too long." She hesitated before speaking. "Where will we go?" "There's an old communications hub about 20 kilometers north," he explained. "If we can reach it, I might be able to send a message, get someone to pick us up." Lyra looked uncertain. "And if no one comes?" Ryan gave a small shrug. "Then we keep going." Before either could say more, the old console in the corner of the shelter flickered to life. The sudden light startled them both. A soft hum filled the room and a faint hologram appeared above the console. Lyra rose to her feet, eyes wide. That's a royal transmission code," she whispered. Ryan stepped closer, hand resting on his weapon. "Someone's reaching out to you?" The hologram shimmered, then stabilized into a familiar face. A tall alien soldier wearing the crest of the Royal Guard. His voice was deep, filled with static. "My queen, it's Commander Arik. You are alive." "Thank the stars," Lyra's breath caught. "Arik," she said softly. "You served at my side for 10 years. The hologram nodded. "I never stopped searching for you. Many of us regret what happened. We were told you had fallen, that there was no hope." Ryan frowned. "Convenient story," he muttered. Lyra turned to him sharply. "He was one of my most trusted guards. He saved my life more than once." Arik's image flickered again. "My queen, please come to the northern ridge. We have a ship ready. We can take you to what remains of our fleet. You can rebuild the empire." Lyra's heart pounded. For the first time in days, she felt a spark of hope. "You found the fleet?" she asked. "Yes," Arik said firmly. "But we must move quickly. Enemy forces are tracking you. Come to the ridge before sunset." Ryan folded his arms. "And what if this is a trap?" Arik's gaze shifted toward him. "The human?" he asked coldly. "Why is a human soldier with you, my queen?" Lyra stepped forward, her tone steady. "Because he saved my life when no one else did." Arik bowed his head. "Then I owe him thanks as well. But time is short. Come soon, my queen." The transmission ended, leaving silence behind. The console powered down. Ryan stared at the dark screen. "That didn't feel right," he said quietly. Lyra turned to him. "You don't trust him, do you?" Ryan asked. She hesitated. "I want to." Arik was loyal once, Ryan shook his head. "People change when the world falls apart. You saw what your guards did." Lyra looked down. "You think I'm being foolish," he met her eyes. "I think you want to believe someone still cares. But believing doesn't make it true." For a long time she said nothing. Then she whispered, "If there's a chance, any chance that my people still live, I have to see it." Ryan sighed. He could see the determination in her face, the same strength that made her a queen. "Then I'm coming with you," Lyra frowned. "It could be dangerous," he gave a small, dry laugh. "Everything's been dangerous since the day I met you." As the sun began to set, they left the outpost and headed north. The path was rough, broken ground, black dust, and twisted metal everywhere. The silence of the wasteland was unsettling. Every sound of wind or rock made Ryan tighten his grip on his weapon. When they reached the ridge, they saw a faint light flickering in the distance. A small camp. A ship stood there, sleek, dark, ready for flight. Lyra's heart lifted. "He wasn't lying," she said softly. Ryan didn't answer. He scanned the area through his visor. Something's off. Too quiet. Before they could take another step, a sharp voice cut through the air. "Drop your weapon, human." Ryan froze. From the shadows, figures appeared. Armed alien soldiers wearing the old insignia of Lyra's Royal Guard. But their eyes were cold. Their weapons aimed directly at him. Arik stepped forward from the group, tall and grim. His face showed no warmth now, only power. "My queen," he said smoothly. "You're safe now. You've done well to survive." Lyra stepped toward him. "Arik, you said you came to rescue me." "I did," he said with a thin smile. "But the Empire has changed. We need a leader who understands the cost of power. A queen who will obey." Ryan raised his weapon. You're insane, Arik turned to him. You human are no longer needed. Before Ryan could react, the soldiers fired. The blast hit the ground beside him, throwing up dust. Ryan dove behind a rock, firing back. The air filled with the sound of energy bolts and shouts. Lyra screamed, "Stop!" Arik, what are you doing? Arik stepped closer, his tone cold. Taking back what was stolen. The throne. The power. You've already lost your people's loyalty, my queen. Ryan shouted, Lyra! Get back. But before she could move, 2 guards grabbed her by the arms. Ryan fired again, hitting one, but there were too many. He saw them drag her toward the ship as Arik smiled cruelly. Farewell, human, Arik said. You played your part. She spoke without turning. Back when I was still on my throne, I believed power meant control. That leading meant never showing weakness, but now, I think I understand that real strength is different. How so? Ryan asked gently. Strength, she said softly, is standing alone when everything falls. But love. She paused, her voice trembling. Love is when someone chooses to stand beside you anyway. Ryan's chest tightened. For a moment, he couldn't speak. Lyra, he said finally, you don't have to face this alone. Whatever comes next, we face it together. She looked up at him, eyes bright with emotion. Even if it means never returning home? He smiled faintly. Home isn't a place. It's the people you protect. Their eyes met in the dim blue light. For the first time, the distance between them didn't feel impossible. 2 different worlds bound by the same heartbeat. But before either could speak again, the ship's alarm suddenly blared. Ryan spun to the console. Incoming! On the radar, a massive warship appeared, far larger than Arik's fortress. Its energy signature was unknown, powerful, and approaching fast. Lyra's expression hardened. That's not one of ours. Ryan adjusted the scanners. No, it's something else. Something new. The warship sent a transmission, a deep mechanical voice echoing through the cabin. To the last queen of Seriphus, your empire is finished. Surrender the human and your life will be spared. Ryan's hand tightened on the controls. Guess they don't like humans much. Lyra's eyes flashed with anger. They dare to threaten me after all I've lost. Ryan looked at her. We can't fight that thing head on. We'll be blown out of the sky. She stared at the warship through the window, her jaw set. Then we don't fight. Not yet. She took a deep breath, her royal strength returning. We disappear. We find allies. My people will rise again, but not as conquerors. As survivors, Ryan smiled faintly. Now that sounds like a queen talking. Lyra looked at him, her voice quiet but strong. And what about you, Captain? When I rebuild, when I reclaim what's left, where will you go? He hesitated. Haven't thought that far ahead? Her eyes softened. Then think about this. You could stay. Not as a soldier, but as someone who stood with me when the stars fell. He didn't answer right away. The air between them was heavy, filled with something unspoken. Then, as the warship's shadow grew closer behind them, Ryan turned the ship sharply into the darkness of an asteroid field. Lasers sliced past them, missing by inches. The ship trembled violently. Lyra held onto the console, shouting over the roar. Can you lose them? Ryan grinned through the chaos. I can try. The ship weaved through the asteroids, dodging rock and fire. One engine burst into flames, but Ryan kept control. Finally, after a long, tense chase, the enemy signal vanished. Silence returned. Lyra exhaled, shaking slightly. You did it, Ryan smiled faintly. Told you, I'm hard to get rid of. Lyra stared at him, a soft smile forming on her lips. You're more than that, Ryan. You're the reason I still believe in hope. Outside, the stars were calm again. Inside, 2 hearts, one human, one alien, beat in quiet rhythm. And as they drifted deeper into the unknown, Lyra realized something she had never said out loud. Power could be taken. Thrones could fall. Empires could burn. But love, real love, was something even a galaxy couldn't destroy, fade out. The stars burned bright above the silent void. Far from the ashes of Seriphus, the small ship floated quietly through the dark, its engines weak but alive. Inside, Ryan and Lyra worked side by side, repairing the damaged systems. It had been days since they escaped the enemy warship. Every sound in the silence reminded them how fragile their lives had become. Yet they were together, and that was enough. Ryan adjusted a panel, sparks flickering against his hands. That should hold for now, he said, wiping sweat from his face. Lyra looked at him, concern in her voice. You haven't slept in 2 days. He smiled tiredly. Neither have you, she gave a small, knowing smile. Queens don't rest when their people are lost. And soldiers don't stop until their job is done, Ryan replied softly. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, two souls bound by war, fate, and something deeper neither could name. Suddenly, the radar beeped. Ryan frowned and moved closer. No, not again. Lyra stepped forward. What is it? He stared at the screen, a massive fleet, dozens of warships heading directly toward them. But these weren't RX forces. The signal codes were different. Lyra's eyes widened. That's the Crimson Dominion. Ryan turned to her. You know them? They were enemies of my empire, old conquerors who vanished centuries ago. If they've returned, it means the galaxy will burn again. The ship's lights flickered. A voice came through the communicator, deep, cold, mechanical. To the last queen of Seraphis and her human pet, your kind has no place in this universe. Prepare to be erased, Ryan's jaw tightened. Friendly bunch, Lyra's voice hardened. They want to finish what the war began, to end both our species. He looked at her. Then we make our stand. She turned to him, eyes sharp but full of emotion. Ryan, we can't win this fight. Not here, he stepped closer. Maybe not. But if we run forever, we'll never stop them. Someone has to hold the line. Lyra's breath caught. You would die for this? He shook his head. Not for this. For you. Her heart trembled. Ryan, he smiled gently. If I fall, at least I'll know I protected the only thing worth saving. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but she nodded. Then I stand with you. Until the end. They moved together, preparing the ship for one last battle. Ryan armed the pulse cannons while Lyra rerouted the remaining power to the shields. The engines roared, weak but defiant. Outside, the first of the Dominion ships appeared, black and enormous, glowing with crimson light. Ryan gripped the controls. Here they come. The enemy opened fire. Energy bolts streaked across the void, shaking the small ship. Sparks flew everywhere, alarms screamed, and metal panels tore loose. Lyra shouted, Shields at 40%. Keep them up. Ryan yelled back, firing the cannons. The blast tore through one enemy fighter, then another. But the rest kept coming, a swarm of death surrounding them. A hit struck the engine. The ship spun violently, alarms blaring. Ryan struggled with the controls, his arm bleeding from shrapnel. Ryan, Lyra called, reaching for him. I'm fine, he grunted, trying to steady the ship. The hull cracked. Flames burst from the right side. They were losing fast. Lyra looked at the screen, at the dozens of ships closing in. We can't hold them. Ryan looked at her, really looked at her, and then a strange calm filled his eyes. Maybe we don't have to. He turned a switch, rerouting all power to the core. The ship began to glow. Lyra realized what he was doing. No, Ryan, you'll overload the reactor. It'll explode. He smiled softly. Exactly. Her eyes widened in horror. You'll die. He took her hand gently. If it saves you, then it's worth it. Tears streamed down her face. Don't you dare say that, he looked into her eyes. You once told me a queen protects her people. Well, now let me protect mine. Before she could stop him, he pressed a sequence on the console, activating the escape pod. Lyra's voice broke. Ryan, please. He touched her face, his voice calm. You gave me something no war ever could, a reason to fight. She shook her head, crying. Come with me. He smiled one last time. Maybe in another life. The pod launched suddenly, shooting into the void. Through the small window, Lyra saw Ryan standing at the console, surrounded by fire and light. Then the ship exploded, a blinding wave of blue energy tearing through the Dominion fleet, destroying everything in its path. The pod drifted away, spinning through the silence. Inside, Lyra pressed her hands to the glass, watching the stars flicker through her tears. Ryan, she whispered. The explosion's light faded. The enemy fleet was gone. The galaxy was safe, but her heart was broken. Days later, her pod was found by the remaining survivors of Seraphis. When they brought her aboard their ship, she wore no crown, only the quiet strength of someone who had lost everything, and still stood. Years passed. Under her rule, a new alliance formed, humans and Seraphians living side by side. Peace returned to the stars, but every night Queen Lyra stood at the edge of her ship, looking into the endless sky, where a small point of blue light still shimmered far away. Sometimes, When the stars were quiet, she swore she could hear his voice in the wind of space. "I'm still with you," she smiled softly, placing her hand over her heart. "Always," she whispered. And as the galaxy turned slowly around her, the legend of the human and the alien queen was born, a story of two hearts that defied the stars themselves. Because love, she learned, was not bound by world or species. It was the only thing powerful enough to outlast even the end of empires, fade out.